So from working with hundreds of aspiring data analysts over the last 2 years, I've seen two differentiating factors beyond the technical skills that separate the analysts who get jobs quickly and are able to really stand out in the job market from those who struggle and take a bit longer. And it comes down to two main things: communication and understanding of business metrics. Now, business metrics is the magic ingredient to standing out, because no matter how complex your SQL gets, if you're not able to make your insights actually relevant to a stakeholder, then you're not actually going to be relevant to a company. And so in today's video, I want to do a refreshed version of my business metrics video in which I'm going to teach you the framework to understand business metrics across industries so that you can level up your resume, your portfolio projects, and your interview responses. If you're new here, I'm Christine. I'm a former data director and a hiring manager who now helps people take the most direct path to working a job in data. And on this channel, I share the strategies, frameworks, and the mindset tips to help you stand out. Let's dive in. By the way, today's video is going to look a little bit old school because I'm looking for a video editor, but I just didn't want to wait to get this lesson out there to you guys. So if you know a really good editor or you are one yourself, then check out the description below because I have a referral bonus for anyone who helps us hire. So let's make sure that we just cover our fundamentals really quick. What is a metric and what is a dimension? A metric is a quantitative value that shows how something is actually performing. And we're looking at this all the time to understand the fluctuations in their values and help guide stakeholder decisions. A dimension is basically a contextual addition on top of that metric. It's a qualitative characteristic that helps add context to that metric. However, different stakeholders care about different kinds of dimensions. It basically answers the what, the where, and the when behind a metric fluctuation. So for example, let's take revenue, which is a very popular metric for every single company. It basically captures how much money that company is making. While every single company cares about this metric, not every stakeholder at the company will care about the same slice or dimension of that metric. So for example, someone in the executive team will want to see what that high level revenue number is before we actually even cut it into the different dimensions. However, someone on product might be more interested in how revenue looks sliced by product, and someone on the finance or sales team might be more interested in how that revenue is sliced by the different regions. The more fluent you are in your industry's key metrics, the more valuable you become in interviews, because onboarding someone onto new domain knowledge is actually a huge time investment for hiring managers. So the more you can show someone that you already speak their language in interviews, portfolios, and in your resume, the more you will stand out when you actually interview. Now, let's make this really concrete. I want to show you guys some real stakeholder questions that I've gotten throughout my job and that are pretty common industry data analyst questions. As I'm going through these questions, I want you to actually pause this video and think to yourself, if I were to try to answer this stakeholder question, what metrics and dimensions would I need to see in the data set? And how would I even begin exploring this question? If you feel like there is a really big gap and you're really stumped in thinking about how you would even take that first step, then that indicates that you probably need to spend a little bit more time on the actual business domain knowledge and studying these business metrics, and a little bit less time on the technical tools. So let's say a marketing manager asks you, why did the conversion rate in the US free trial page go down? Or an FP&A analyst might ask you, what were the main drivers behind the revenue spike last month? And a product manager might ask you, what is the adoption rate of the new webinar tool? And how does that compare against the old webinar tool? Now, at first, you might be looking at these questions and thinking to yourself, these questions seem to be coming from every single direction. If I don't have experience in marketing or in product or in finance, how am I ever going to learn the dynamics of all these different kinds of metrics as a data analyst? One thing I want you to notice is that every single one of these questions has a metric and asks a question about a metric fluctuation or about that value's movement. So almost every stakeholder question boils down to just three main things. Why did this happen? Is it good or bad? And what should we actually do about it? So this means that for early career data analysts, it's actually more important to understand the overall framework to be able to diagnose and explain metric fluctuations. And here's a concept that is going to unlock that for you. So you can think of business metrics as belonging to two different categories. There are industry-specific metrics, and then there are team-specific metrics. industry-specific metrics are unique to a specific field, how that industry actually operates and how they track their performance. And it tends to vary a lot between different fields. It's not necessarily as transferable, but it does signify very deep domain knowledge. This is something that you would likely build in experience over time. The team-specific metrics, however, are values that actually cut across industries, because if you think about it, many companies have similar teams. Every company is going to have some kind of finance function that tracks how much money is going in and out. Every company probably also has a product or a research or an operations team or a marketing team, because every company is trying to spread awareness about their actual product. What this means is that if you can understand team-specific metrics, then you start building some transferable knowledge. So let me give you some examples of metrics that I was working with all the time when I was working as a data analyst, a data manager, and a data director. So I worked at JustWorks, which was a B2B SaaS company, or business-to-business subscription as a service company. I also worked at Oscar Health, which is an insurance company, and I also worked at Vimeo, which is a video hosting platform, which has a B2C as well as B2B function. So business to consumer and business to business. I'm going to leave some of those acronyms for you to research on your own after this video. So within each of these different companies, they have their industry-specific metrics. Now here's the good news. Every one of these companies has a marketing team, which is going to be tracking values like traffic, click-through rate, LTV, and CAC, or customer acquisition cost. They all have a finance team, which tracks numbers like revenue, churn, expenses, and profit. And they also have their own version of a product team, which is going to track values like retention. So how long are subscribers or users actually staying on the platform, and usage. What features do they use and how long do they use them for? Now, across these companies, they might call these metrics slightly different things internally, but I've simplified it a little bit for the learning here. But you can see that about like 60 to 70% of the metrics actually overlap, which means that by learning team metrics, you can actually build transferable domain knowledge. So even if you switch industries or you're completely new to a certain field, you will already understand the marketing, finance, and ops metrics that are relevant to almost every single company. But if you also want to go a step above and really know what a company really cares about, then don't just read their about page or their mission statement. You should actually research the industry metrics that they track. And you can do this by looking at their earnings reports or any other kind of reports that they publish. And these are the true mirror of a company's priorities. I've actually made a freebie for you guys that is a business metrics cheat sheet specifically for aspiring data analysts. It's going to show you the key metrics that you should know across industries, definitions that data analysts should know for each one of them, who the relevant stakeholders are, and also why it matters. This is going to be really helpful for you to see the kinds of metrics that you should be focusing on in your portfolio projects, resumes, and your interview responses. So check that out down below. So how do we actually learn about metrics? Now, this is one of the most difficult things for aspiring analysts to do. And I will tell you guys right now that one of the interviews I failed early in my career was actually with Meta, so Facebook, and I had done all the technical interviews. I even flew out to California and did a full day long interview, and I had nailed the statistics stuff, nailed the SQL, nailed the Python. At the end, the feedback they gave me for why I didn't get the job as a data scientist is because there was one interview that was a case study on business metrics. And that was where I really struggled because I had never really spent the time to understand the dynamics of these metrics before. And so now I'm making this video for you guys so that you start to think about how you could study these metrics on your own. Every single metric can be thought of in 4 different layers. First, there is the definition. So that's the concept. What is the actual concept of this metric and how is it calculated? So for example, with revenue, the concept is it's how much money a company is making, and the calculation is just it's all of the sales that have come through without any expenses, without any overhead being taken out. The next level is the business goal. So what business goal is this metric actually tied to? And who are the stakeholders and the teams who care about this metric? Basically, why is it actually important? Now, revenue obviously is very important because it's what every company goes into business to do, which is to make money. And so the stakeholders there are going to be everyone from the executives to the C-suite to the leads in marketing, product, finance. And so that's a metric that is a very clear North Star KPI. However, not all metrics are made equal. Some are very obviously important because they actually move the needle forward, whereas some metrics are what I call vanity metrics. So these are just nice to have have metrics. For example, at Vimeo, one of our vanity metrics was the average number of likes and comments on a video. And the reason why this is a nice to have is because it's not actually a metric that converts directly to subscribers or to sales. But someone like the product team, for example, might be interested in just understanding this metric to just get a sense of how often people are using a certain function. And so one of the things that you should be focusing on when you're setting metrics is asking yourself, who is this metric important to, and what level of importance does this metric actually have? And more of that is on the cheat sheet. Then the next level up starts to get more strategic. It's what are the trends in this metric? So what are the actual important patterns and anomalies that we're observing in this metric? And you can see how we move away from the technical calculation and the definition to the observation of the behavior of this metric. So that's when we would actually start looking at the reports and dashboards and start bringing in some of the narrative. And then the highest level of understanding of that metric is when you can build a recommendation based on what you're seeing. So that's when you're answering, what should you actually do about it? So for example, a trend in revenue might sound something like, we've observed that over the last 12 months, monthly revenue has dropped by an average of 5%. Most of this is driven by lower demand in the EMEA region. And then a recommendation based on this trend might be something like, we should see if we can reallocate some of our marketing budget to the EMEA region to see if we can start to capture more of that audience. Now, the first two layers, the fundamental layers, are things that you can learn on your own, right? You can use ChatGPT, you can use the freebie below to learn what the definition is and to understand the business goal. But the last two layers are things that you usually have to learn within an actual company context or within an actual project where you're working with stakeholders, because this is typically embedded in the context of the actual company. But if you can start gearing your projects towards the business metrics that I mentioned in that freebie, then you'll be already on the right path. So what does this actually look like at work as a data analyst? Where do metrics live? Well, obviously in the raw data sets. So whether that data is in Excel, SQL, you're looking at it in Python, every single table is basically made up of business metrics and their dimensions. Then as a data analyst, of course, you're going to be the one who is querying these metrics or building reports and dashboards, and also telling the story to stakeholders, where you're then going to be looking at that dashboard and trying to piece apart, what are the patterns that are emerging here? What am I seeing about the fluctuations in revenue? And what is the story that's happening? And then that metric flows all the way upwards to stakeholders and people who are making decisions about the direction of the company. So as you can see, even one number like revenue actually travels through many different layers in a company. By the time the CEO is discussing it in a town hall, it's actually gone from a SQL query and Excel sheets that data analysts and data engineers are looking at to a dashboard and to a PowerPoint that is then a collaborative effort between you and the stakeholders. And finally, to the story and the narrative that people then use to explain how the company is doing to everyone else. Quite a powerful job if you think about it. So when are you actually ready? When are you ready to start applying to jobs? This is my benchmark that I've seen work very well for students to feel prepared in interviews. When you can take a data set and you can generate 2 to 3 company relevant insights and summarize them in plain English as if you're talking to a non-technical stakeholder, and explain your thinking on which metric would you care most about in this situation and why, that's a really good indication that you would do well in an interview. So for example, if you're in an interview and you can actually say something like, I analyzed 200K subscription transactions and found revenue fluctuations driven by high refund rates, and the refund rates were centered in this specific region or this specific time. I built a Tableau dashboard geared towards the marketing team, and I recommended targeting first-time subscribers in the EMEA region with retention campaigns. That's a really good indication that you're really thinking like a data analyst. This is exactly the kind of experience and thinking that we build in my mentorship program by working on 2 real-world projects where you will get your hands dirty on real data and real business metrics the same way that you would on the job. So if you're interested in joining the next cohort, check out the link below. And I hope this video was helpful, even if it was a little bit old school in the aesthetics. If it was helpful, leave me a comment below. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video.